What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast, aka JT Sports Live. On this episode, we're going to be discussing why Lamar Jackson is about to go off this year. The Ravens are about to unleash the full potential of Lamar. Is Kyle Pitts a bust? How good will the Tennessee Vols be this upcoming season? And will the Philadelphia Eagles suffer from the infamous Super Bowl hangover? Before we get into it, if you haven't already, make sure that you guys leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can listen to the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms. We're not just available on YouTube. You can find us on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. All you got to do is go to whichever podcasting platform that you use, type in the JT Sports Podcast, and it will pop up. Or you can go down to the description down below, scroll down a little bit, and you will have the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast in front of you. You can click on one of those, leave us with a 5-star review if you enjoy, and share this episode or the podcast with your friends, family members, or acquaintances. Now, we all remember when Lamar Jackson went off in 2019 and he won NFL MVP. And if you are a Ravens fan, I have some good news for you. And if you're a non-Ravens fan, this might be some bad news to your ears. But I have a feeling that Lamar Jackson is going to put up an MVP caliber season once again in 2023. Because with the addition of Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson is about to be unleashed. You are about to see the full potential of Lamar Jackson. You see, Lamar was really good under Greg Roman, but he reached a certain peak under Greg Roman, and Greg Roman kind of handicapped Lamar Jackson's potential, because Lamar Jackson just isn't a great runner, but he's also a really good passer. And one knock that a lot of Ravens fans had on Greg Roman was his inability to get the most out of the passing game. That's not something that Greg Roman specialized in. So they move on from Greg Roman and they bring in new OC Todd Monken. And if you have followed Todd Monken's coaching career, everywhere he's been, his offenses have been really good, especially when it comes to running the football and throwing the football. And with Todd Monken calling the plays for the Baltimore Ravens this year, Lamar Jackson is going to elevate to a level that we have not seen before. He is going to be the true definition of a dual threat quarterback. We already know that this dude is damn near unstoppable when he gets into the open field. I think that he probably is the most scariest player in the NFL. And now you couple that with a offensive coordinator that's going to be able to elevate this passing game. Lamar Jackson is about to go off. I've been telling people this all off season, and I'm giving you guys the final warning. When Lamar Jackson plays, the Ravens win 70% of their games. As a matter of fact, when Lamar Jackson is healthy, the Ravens are normally in the conversation for having the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. And then once he gets injured, that's when things start to go downhill. But if Lamar Jackson can stay healthy, I'm trying to tell you people, he's going to have another MVP caliber season. The weapons that he has around him, OBJ, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, a top 10 offensive line. He has all the necessary tools at his disposal to put up another MVP performance this year. If you thought that Lamar Jackson has reached his ceiling, you're wrong. I'm trying to tell you folks, man, Lamar Jackson is a way better passer than what a lot of people give him credit for. You think about how good Jalen Hurts was last year throwing the football, especially outside the numbers. I think that Lamar Jackson is just as good as better. You just don't see it because Greg Roman doesn't really specialize in the passing game department. And I get really irritated when people say, oh, Lamar Jackson, he goes to the playoffs and he falls because he can't throw the football. Well, duh, because he didn't have an offensive coordinator who knew how to build a solid passing attack. That's why with Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson is about to continue to elevate to a different level that we have not seen before. Lamar Jackson, his full potential has not been unlocked yet. Todd Monken has the keys to unlocking that thing. Lamar Jackson is about to go from Super Saiyan 1 to Super Saiyan Blue. If you aren't already on the Lamar Jackson hype train for this year, this may be your final chance to get the last tickets that are remaining. Because I'm trying to tell you guys, man, Lamar Jackson is about to go off this year. Lamar Jackson is one of the most talented quarterbacks, maybe the most talented QB in the game outside of Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not trying to say he's better than Joe Burrow or whoever else, but I am saying if we are judging and ranking quarterbacks in the NFL solely based on talent, there's no way you can tell me that Lamar Jackson isn't top 2 in that conversation. He's arguably one of the fastest players in the game. He has a really good arm, and he is a really gifted passer. And we haven't really seen how good he is after throwing the football because he's been held back in that department with Greg Romans, who treats 3-4 tight end sets like it's the spread offense. I remember on Sunday Night Football last year, I was watching the Ravens play, and Chris Collinsworth was talking about the sit down that they had with Greg Roman and about running more 3 receiver sets. And he was like, man, we don't need to run more 3 receiver sets. We don't need more receivers on the field because we got good tight ends. This dude looks at tight ends like the receivers. Y'all don't see the problem with that if you're a non-Ravens fan? You don't think that was a little bit of the issue for why Lamar Jackson wasn't able to deliver in the playoffs? For the people who have the narrative that Lamar Jackson is just a choker in the playoff, I want to ask you, do you think that's all because of Lamar, or you think that the play calling didn't have something to do with that? Todd Monken was one of the best offseason additions out of any player or coach that has been hired this year. Right behind Vic Fangio, and not enough people are talking about this, man. You really need to pay attention to who these teams hire as their coordinators, because it's a large reason for why some of your favorite players have the success that they have. Lamar Jackson could very well win his second NFL MVP this year. And this is coming from a diehard Steelers fan, but fandom aside, I'm a fan of the NFL first. And for those of you guys who've been following this platform ever since I first got on here, I've been telling you folks that Lamar Jackson was going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the game. And it seems like a lot of people on Twitter and social media just like to make fun of Lamar Jackson, call him a running back, and all those running back jokes are cool. But this year, you're about to see Lamar Jackson actually prove a lot of those jokesters wrong and show everybody how talented he is throwing the football. Lamar Jackson is about to be unleashed, people. You are about to see Lamar Jackson play at a level that you haven't seen before. Lamar Jackson wins 70% of his games. When he's healthy, the Ravens are normally in contention for the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. And Lamar Jackson having Todd Monken as his OC, I think that the Ravens have a very great chance at being able to win the AFC this year. I'm not saying this just to say it, man. I'm trying to tell you guys, with the roster that Baltimore has assembled this year, this is a good enough team that's more than capable of being able to go on the road to Arrowhead and knocking off Patrick Mahomes. Lamar Jackson is one of the scariest players in the NFL. If you listen to any NFL player that plays on the defense side of football that's played against Lamar Jackson, they make this dude seem like he's a damn nightmare. And we know how difficult it is to stop Patrick Mahomes, but do you know how difficult it's going to be to defend Lamar Jackson this year with him getting elevated as a passer? The Baltimore Ravens are giving him the ability to audible plays. How many of you guys knew last year when the Baltimore Ravens played the Miami Dolphins, when they were down big and they came back, Lamar Jackson was given the ability to audible out of plays and kind of somewhat call the shots? And he ended up running for over 100 rushing yards. He had 300 and something passing yards, and he led the Baltimore Ravens to a comeback victory against the Miami Dolphins. Lamar Jackson now has been given the full keys to this offense. There's nothing slowing him down. There's nothing limiting him. And there's nothing that's going to keep him from elevating to the level that he should have been at years ago. Lamar Jackson, if you thought he has reached his ceiling, you're about to see him elevate to a different level that you haven't seen him before. There's a very good chance he could throw for over 4K yards and maybe lead the NFL in touchdown passes again. It may sound absurd to say that when we're talking about a guy like Lamar Jackson, but this dude is probably the most talented QB that we've had in the last decade. And no disrespect to Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is a phenomenal QB, but if we're talking about pure athleticism, nobody's effing with Lamar. You know that. Even if you hate the Baltimore Ravens, you gotta give Lamar Jackson credit where credit is due. This brother is one of the most physically gifted QBs to ever play this game. He's a better passer than Michael Vick. He's arguably one of the fastest players in the game. We don't really know how fast his 40 time is, but there are rumors that say that he runs a 4.28 or a 4.3. And in the open field, this dude is somebody that you don't want to see. I was listening to Tyrann Mathieu on Twitter when Lamar Jackson was having his contract disputes describe what it was like to play against Lamar. Honey Badger was going off on folks on Twitter saying, you must have never played against Lamar Jackson. Do you not know how difficult it's going to be to slow down this Ravens offense with Lamar Jackson being elevated as a passer by Todd Monken? You got to account for his dual threat ability on the ground, and then he's going to be able to carve you up through the air? How are you going to stop this man? Tell me, how do you game plan for that? Lamar Jackson this season is on his way to winning a potential second MVP in his NFL career. If you thought that Lamar Jackson has reached his potential, you're about to see this man elevate to a way entirely different stratosphere, man. And I'm a Steelers fan telling you this, and I'm a little bit frightened they'll go against Lamar Jackson this season because the Ravens could most definitely be special this year. So I was on Twitter the other night and I saw this tweet that started going viral on my damn timeline that said, is Kyle Pitts the biggest tight end bust of all time? Once again, I'm going to read this one more time. Biggest tight end bust of all time with the question mark. So this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do, people. Kyle Pitts had the greatest rookie season ever for a tight end. His rookie season in 2021, he had 68 receptions, 1,026 receiving yards. He was averaging 15.1 yards per reception. And although he only caught a touchdown, that's probably the most productive rookie season that we've ever seen out of a tight end. It normally takes a tight end 3 years to even have somewhat of the kind of production that Kyle Pitts had in his rookie season. And last year, yeah, he had a little bit of a letdown, but it wasn't mainly due to him. It was because, first of all, you have Marcus Mariota throwing him the damn football. Marcus Mariota doesn't have a good arm, and he isn't really known for being a quarterback that takes a lot of shots downfield. And not only that, but Kyle Pitts also was dealing with an injury that sidelined him late last season. How are we already considering Kyle Pitts to be a bust after one down year that really wasn't his fault? That makes absolutely no sense to me. That is absurd. You trying to label this man a bust after one down year due to injuries and poor quarterback play? Do you not know that Kyle Pitts is one of the most talented tight ends in the NFL? You can line this guy up in the slot, outside that receiver. He is one of the most physically imposing tight ends in the game. He can blow past you with his speed. He can moss defensive backs with his size and athleticism. And most linebackers can't guard this dude in coverage because how talented he is as a route runner. And we really finna come on here and try to disrespect Kyle Pitts by asking this question, biggest tight end bust of all time. You know what's the reason for this? The fantasy football community. This is why not too many people take the fantasy football community serious when it comes to football takes like this. A lot of people who play fantasy football view Kyle Pitts as a bust when it comes to a fantasy football perspective. But don't try to intertwine the worlds of fantasy football with real life football, because you're going to sound real ignorant and you're going to sound like you don't know what the hell you're talking about, like this clown that we see right here on our screen. We really having this question right now? Biggest tight end bust of all time? What? Kyle Pitts isn't even close to being a bust, and he's definitely not close to being the biggest tight end bust of all time. There's been plenty of worse tight ends that have come through the NFL. You trying to ask this question, trying to paint Kyle Pitts already out to be a bust when he's going into his third season? What Kyle Pitts did his rookie season, most tight ends don't even do their first 3 years. And I feel a little bit like Atlanta kind of is underutilizing Kyle Pitts. I would love to see him moved around way more on the offense. I would love to see him playing a little bit more receiver, because at Florida, he just wasn't a traditional tight end that you just keep at the tight end position. You can move him around. You can cause a lot of mismatches. That's why Kyle Pitts went so high in the 2021 NFL draft. You don't normally see a tight end getting drafted in the top 5 or top 10 all that often, unless they have something that's different about them. And what was different about Kyle Pitts was his athleticism at that position and his versatility to be able to play more than just tight end. We already trying to label Kyle Pitts a bust after one down season. This is why people don't respect the fantasy football community. You come on, you go on Twitter with your Twitter fingers, and you ask dumb questions like this. And don't go down into the comment section and say, JT, this is a fair question, because no, the hell it's not. It's a fair question to ask a guy who had the greatest rookie season ever for a tight end, and after one down year due to poor quarterback play and injuries, we try to label this man a bust, and he's not an injury-prone player. He doesn't miss a lot of games. This was an absurd question to even be thought of by whoever tweeted this. And I'm not going to mention his app because he doesn't deserve recognition for this. I should have blurred it out on the screen. We really are trying to call Kyle Pitts a bust, and there are really people who agree that Kyle Pitts is a bust. Have y'all watched the Atlanta Falcons? Just be honest. Be honest. If you've been watching the Atlanta Falcons, you would know that Matt Ryan, his final year in the ATL in the 404, the only player he had to throw the football to was Kyle Pitts. That's pretty much the whole entire offense. Kyle Pitts and Cordell Patterson. Matt Ryan pretty much was saying, F it. Kyle Pitts is down there somewhere. Kyle Pitts, man. This is why people don't respect the fantasy football community, because the person who tweeted this out is one of those fantasy football experts or analysts. If you're a fantasy football analyst, keep your fantasy football takes separated from the real life football takes, because when you don't, you sound foolish. And you get things like this, and there's really people on Twitter who agree with this, who think that Kyle Pitts is a bust. Like, I know not too many of you guys are watching the Atlanta Falcons for the last 2 years, and you got a very good reason not to, because they've been terrible. But please don't try to tie fantasy football into real life, because Kyle Pitts is one of the most physically gifted tight ends in the NFL. He may be the most athletic tight end in the game. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Travis Kelce or George Kittle or Darren Waller, but if we were to have these tight ends run a 40-yard dash and do all the drills that they do at the combine, Kyle Pitts would dominate every single one of them. Travis Kelce doesn't have the athleticism that Kyle Pitts has. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful to Travis Kelce. But if you are a real and true football fan, you would know the athleticism that Kyle Pitts has. This dude is a matchup nightmare. I think that this tweet was out of poor context. I really do. Biggest tight end bust of all time. Bro, this man is going into his third season. He's only played 2 years of football, and his best season, his rookie season up to this point, was better than the majority of tight ends going into their first 3 years in the league. Kyle Pitts is far from a bust. As a matter of fact, he looks like an absolute stud for the Atlanta Falcons, and he's one of the main reasons why I'm on the fence about the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know about how their defense is going to do. I'm not expecting too much out of their defense, but I do think that their offense has the potential to be pretty solid this year. You got him, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, who I was a huge fan of. I'm not high on Desmond Ridder, but they do have a pretty good offensive line. Like, if Desmond Ridder can be serviceable this year, and Kyle Pitts and everybody else can stay healthy on offense, the Atlanta Falcons could be a contender for the postseason. I'm not saying they're a lock for the playoffs, but I do think they can be a contender because they do have weapons. And people asking questions like this tells you everything you need to know about how much football they watch, at least how much they watch the Atlanta Falcons. Anybody who watches the Atlanta Falcons will tell you that Kyle Pitts has damn near been either the best or second best player on this offense for the past 2 seasons outside of Cordell Patterson. This is a really disrespectful question to ask, and this is somebody who's coming from the fantasy football community. This is why the fantasy football community, those analysts, they get clowned because their real life football takes are really dumb. The biggest tight end bust of all time, and what universe is a man who had the kind of rookie season that Kyle Pitts had as a tight end a bust? He wasn't even bad last year. He got held back to bad QB play. Oh, well, JT doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. So what? He gets yards. He keeps the drive alive. He moves the chains, doesn't he? You people just nitpick everything, man. Like, everybody got to have 10 touchdowns or more to be considered the best at their position. What Kyle Pitts has done so far in his career has been better than what the majority of tight ends do their first 3-4 years in the game. It takes the tight end normally 3 years of development to even be able to put up 70% of a year that Kyle Pitts had his rookie season. I'm really annoyed that this question kept popping up on my timeline. Kyle Pitts is not a damn bust. I can't believe I even have to address this right now. If you think Kyle Pitts is a bust, I will tell you this. Go back and watch the games that the Falcons played when he was healthy. He was arguably the best player on this offense for the last 2 years since he got drafted 4th overall coming out of Florida in the 2021 NFL Draft. The Tennessee Vols, man, they came a really long way. They had their first double-digit season of wins since 2007. And going into 2023, man, I think that Tennessee is going to continue the success that they had last year, and they're going to be able to build upon their 2022 campaign. Now, my heart got broke because y'all know I'm a diehard Hendon Hooker fan when South Carolina took him out the game and got him basically thrown out of the first round of the draft and also ended his Heisman hopes. If Hendon Hooker would have stayed healthy all of last season, he would have won the Heisman Trophy over Caleb Williams and whoever else. And what was even more embarrassing is that he wasn't even a finalist. They could even invite Hendon Hooker to NYC. They invited Stetson Bennett over Hendon Hooker. But Hendon Hooker's not with the Detroit Lions. He's in the NFL now. Tennessee has moved on, and they have Joe Milton at QB this year. Now, I know not a lot of people are super high on Joe Milton. A lot of Michigan fans will tell you that he was a bum, he was a scrub, he was a jabroni, he couldn't play. But if you watch what Joe Milton did against Clemson in the Orange Bowl, he was absolutely lights out. And if he can play that way for the whole entire season in 2023, I think potentially he could be better than what Hendon Hooker was. Oh, he could be better than Hendon Hooker, JT, you pushing it? No, he actually can be. He has a way stronger arm than Hendon Hooker. Like, Joe Milton damn near may have the strongest arm in the history of football. Stronger than Jamarcus Russell. I mean, this dude has a damn cannon. He can sling the rock with some of the best of them. And you look at the receivers that he has going into this season, you did lose Jalen Hyatt, but you do return Brew McCoy, and then you got Squirrel Wright. Please, if Squirrel Wright ends up being one of the best receivers in college football, I'm absolutely going to lose my mind, because this is one of the best names I've ever heard out of a wide receiver. Squirrel White, fam? Squirrel White? Every time this man scores a touchdown, I'll be saying, Squirrel. You do not want Squirrel White to end up becoming one of the best college football receivers this season, because I promise to God, he's going to be one of my most talked about players on this platform. If Squirrel White ends up becoming a superstar, I am absolutely going to be abusing this man's name. This man's name is Squirrel White. That's one of the most fantastic football names I have ever heard and pronounced in all my years watching and talking about football. Squirrel White, you saw what he was doing at Clemson in the Orange Bowl. He was going off. And then you got Deontay Thornton from Oregon. He was a monster. In the few games that he was playing in, when he got significant PT for Oregon, he was snapping. I don't think Tennessee is going to have a huge drop-off. Now, they're going to be able to win 11 games like how they did last season. That's going to be a little tough, but I definitely think they're going to be able to get to 9-10 wins this season and be able to be in contention for a New Year's Six bowl game. This offensive line still is going to be really good. They did lose 2 starters, one of those guys being a first-round pick and Darnell Wright. But I think that Tennessee's offensive line is still going to be amongst the best in the SEC. You got your 2 running backs from last year returning in Jabari Small, and then you got Jalen Wright. The only concern that most people have about the Vols is going to be, how good is their defense going to be? And I feel like their defense was underrated, because the way people talk about Tennessee, they make it seem like Tennessee doesn't play defense at all, when their defense was actually pretty good last year. Wasn't this the same defense that shut down LSU, shut down Will Levis in Kentucky's offense? So I don't know where this narrative is coming from some people out there who keep saying that Tennessee doesn't play defense. Tennessee, I think, plays pretty good defense. The only problem with Tennessee's defense is that their secondary was not that good last year. And I think a large reason for that was because Tennessee scores the football at a fast rate, and they score touchdowns so quickly that their defense is on the field for a lot of plays. So you can never really expect to have a great defense when your offense is this fast. Your guys are going to get fatigued. They're going to get worn out a lot faster. And plus, they were blowing out nearly every single body they played until the tail end of the regular season. And of course, teams are going to have to throw the football a lot to get back into the game. So of course, their secondary is going to have some lapses in coverage from time to time. But I think their secondary is going to be dramatically better this season compared to what it was last year. They have plenty of experience on the back end of their secondary. Their defensive line has a lot of experience blended with youth and talent. They have a lot of 4 stars, a lot of highly touted guys on that defensive line. And when you look at their schedule, I don't think it's all that difficult. I think they get to the rough portion of their schedule after their bye week. Before their bye week, they play Virginia, who was awful last year. They're probably still going to be awful this year. You play Austin Peay. I don't even know where the hell that school is located at. It may be in Texas or somewhere. You got to play Florida. You got to go against Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz, man, that's a dub. Then you got to play UTSA. Now, that may be a fun game, because UTSA, I'm not going to sleep on them. If you're a Vols fan, you definitely shouldn't sleep on them neither. They got a very good quarterback, a very good head coach, and they've been one of the better group of 5 teams for over the last 2-3 years. So definitely don't overlook UTSA, but it's really hard to go on the road and win at Tennessee. Then you got to play South Carolina, which, you know, you can never count out. You can never count out the Beamer boys. You never can count them out. We saw what they did to you last year. So you should be going into that South Carolina game motivated with revenge on your line, because not only did they take out your star quarterback and Heisman hopeful Hendon Hooker, but they also ended your college football playoff dreams. So that South Carolina game, you're playing them at home. You should have a lot of motivation to knock those guys off the map and to embarrass those fools. Then after you play them, you go into your bye week, and then that's where shit really starts to get tough. You got Texas A&M. I think that Texas A&M is going to be a legitimate contender in the SEC this year. I think they have a very better chance at winning the SEC West than what a lot of people are giving them credit for. They have one of the best talent. They have one of the most talented rosters in all of college football. They recruited very well. Jimbo Fisher has given up play calling duties to Bobby Petrino. Connor Wigman looked really good last year. And you saw how they knocked off LSU the final game of the season. So definitely do not look over Texas A&M. Then you got to go on the road to play Bama. You know Bama's looking for some payback after what Jalen Hyatt did to that secondary. 5 touchdowns and over 200 damn yards. You know Alabama and Nick Saban are trying to get that revenge on you. Then you got to go on the road and play Kentucky. And there's a lot of Tennessee fans that say they own Kentucky. Kentucky looking pretty nice this year. If you're a Vols fan, I know you probably don't care to keep up with Kentucky football, but Kentucky has a really good team going into this season. They could be just as good as what you're going to be this year, so that's going to be a fun game that could go either way. You got to play UConn, then you got to play Missouri, who is the definition of mid in the SEC. Like, if y'all don't beat Missouri, man, I'm going to be really disappointed if y'all do not blow the brakes off Missouri. They got Eli Drinkowitz as their head coach. Yeah, he has a fun name to pronounce, but Missouri is mid. The M in Missouri means mid. Then you got to play the University of Georgia. You already know Georgia's a juggernaut. They're the top dogs. They're the kings. They're the man in this division. And if Kentucky wants to have a chance at being able to win that SEC East this year, you know you're going to have to find a way to beat Georgia, which I kind of think is not going to happen this year. It could be a closer game than what it was last year. Like, y'all really let me down with how y'all played against Georgia, man. And I got to vent about this because I really haven't had a chance to talk about how y'all got embarrassed by Georgia. I thought y'all was really going to win that game, man. I put money on y'all to win. I had $250 something on y'all beating Georgia, and y'all just crapped the bid like that. Hendon Hooker was getting thrown around like a rag doll. The offense was getting clamped up. Like, what happened to the best offense in college football in that game, man? What happened to y'all? If you're a Vols fan, I know you don't want to go back to that nightmarish game, but we got to talk about it. Y'all offense cannot perform the way that it did against Georgia this year like it did last year, man. Y'all got a really good team. This defense is going to be really good. This could be one of the best defenses in the SEC this year. So there's no reason why this offense should be struggling against Georgia. Your biggest selling point for your program is how great your offense is. College football's fastest, most explosive offense. So y'all shouldn't be getting clamped up by Georgia. I don't give a damn who they have at quarterback. I don't give a damn if they got Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp, the two best defensive minds in college football, on their staff. You got Josh Heupel, people. Josh Heupel is one of the best offensive minds in the game. You got one of the most talented receiving cores in all of college football. And you got Joe Strongarm Milton, who can sling that rock, man. Y'all better go and challenge Georgia this year. Y'all better smack Georgia in the mouth. Y'all don't got to beat Georgia, but at least give Georgia a close game. Have y'all not seen Georgia's schedule? They play a cupcake schedule. And I know we use that to make fun of the SEC, but Georgia really has a cupcake schedule this year. You're pretty much going to be Georgia's first true test late in the season. Y'all better give Georgia a competitive game. Y'all better show them boys what it means to be a Tennessee Vols. You better show them boys what it means to put that Tennessee helmet on and with that big orange T logo on the side of your helmet. So hopefully y'all can give Georgia a game. I think that y'all will. And then y'all got to play Vandy. Now, I think the floor for Tennessee this year is 8 wins. Let's say Joe Milton ends up not being good and he was fool's gold and the Orange Bowl win over Clemson. You still got Nico. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I still don't know how to pronounce it. But he was one of the highly touted quarterbacks coming out of last year's recruiting cycle. So Joe Milton ends up crapping the bid. You throw him in there and things should be rolling at a pretty good level. So worst case scenario, Joe Milton doesn't play good. I think you win 8 games if you have to start Nico. Now, my ceiling for Tennessee, my best case scenario for the Vols this year is 10 wins. If everything goes right, I think Tennessee at best should be able to win 10 games. Maybe they could get to 11 wins again, but when you look at their schedule and the fact that you have to play Texas A&M, who should be really good, Bama on the road, not too many teams beat Alabama at home. I definitely think that those could be 2 potential losses. The Texas A&M game is 50-50. I'm pretty confident that you may struggle against Alabama and Tuscaloosa. You got to play Kentucky on the road right after you play Alabama. Anytime you got to go back on the road and back-to-back weeks, especially with playing Alabama on the road, the week prior is always going to be tough. I think Kentucky is going to be a really good football team this year. And then you got to play Georgia. So you potentially could have 3 losses on your schedule this year. But I think that Tennessee is going to go 9-3. Maybe they end up going 10-2. And Vols fans may get mad that I have them going 9-3, 10-2. You may say, man, JT, who we going to lose to? I mean, I definitely am really confident that you're going to lose to Alabama and Georgia. And I think that third loss could come to either Texas A&M or Kentucky. But either way, I still think that a 9-win, 10-win season would be really good for the Vols, considering the fact that last year they kind of came out of nowhere. They kind of exploded on the scene. There were people who knew Tennessee was going to be good, but I don't think too many people thought Tennessee was going to be in contention for the college football playoffs year 2 under Josh Heupel. Tennessee, the Vols, Rocky Top, they're rolling right now. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the whole entire SEC going into 2023. I don't think they're at the level right now to be able to compete and knock off Georgia for the East. I think maybe one more year or 2 down the road, you'll be able to give Georgia a legitimate challenge and be able to win this division potentially from them. But right now, Georgia just is on another level. They're a football factory, but Tennessee is definitely moving in the right direction, and they're definitely on their way up. And I gotta say this before I move on. Josh Heupel has really proved me wrong. When Tennessee first hired Josh Heupel from UCF, I thought that it was going to be a bad hire. UCF, I thought, got worse under Josh Heupel every single year. I didn't know how well he was going to be able to recruit at Tennessee. He's proved me wrong. And based on what I saw last year, I don't think that Tennessee is going to be going anywhere in the wrong direction anytime soon. I think that they're going to continue to make the SEC and solidify this as the best conference in college football. 7 out of 13 of the last Super Bowl losers has suffered the Super Bowl hangover, which means that you go to the Super Bowl, you lose, and you don't make it to the playoffs. Could the Eagles be the next team to suffer from the infamous Super Bowl hangover? And I strongly doubt that they will. They're favored by Vegas to once again win the NFC. And unless they have like a ton of injuries, Jalen Hurts goes down, they lose a couple of their starters on the offensive line, they lose maybe Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, they probably are going to end up once again making it back to the postseason. And I think there's a very good chance that they end up winning this division once again. Now, I know that the NFC East hasn't had a back-to-back division champion in a very long time, but the Philadelphia Eagles could most definitely end that streak. They still have the most talented team in this division, and I still don't really think that it's all that close. Although Dallas isn't too far behind them, I still think that there's a pretty large gap between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. They lost Javon Hargrave. Eagles fans will tell you that was a gigantic loss. But you know who you're going to be replacing him with? You drafted the demon from Apaka. That is the monster Jalen Carter. And y'all boys know I love me some Jalen Carter. I think this dude is going to come in right away and he's going to have at least 8 or 9 sacks or more. He's that good. Many people are expecting him to have an Aaron Donald-like impact. He potentially could have been the number 1 overall pick in this past year's NFL draft, but he got into some off the field trouble that gave a lot of people some red flags about his character. But I think that Jalen Carter is going to be really productive for Philadelphia his rookie season this year. Then you lost 2 key contributors at linebacker in TJ Edwards, Kazir White, but you're going to be replacing one of those guys with Nakobe Dean, who you were able to steal in last year's draft in the middle of the draft. Nakobe Dean was supposed to be a first-round pick, and somehow you were able to get him in the middle of the draft last year. So he's going to be starting this year. You lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Now, I don't know who you're going to replace him with. You did sign Terrell Edmonds. Me being a Steelers fan, I can tell you that there's going to be a huge drop-off in play from going from Chauncey Gardner to Terrell Edmonds. And Terrell Edmonds isn't bad, but he's not great in coverage. He'll end up making some big plays for you in the run game. He isn't really somebody who misses a lot of tackles. He's more of a good safety when it comes to run support. If you want to blitz him off the edge, I think he can be pretty good in that department as well. But I definitely think you're going to see a drop-off at that position if he's going to be the man who's going to be replacing Deuce. But you do have Reed Blankenship, who had a fantastic season last year. I don't think anybody expected him to be as good as what he was. And then at running back, you lost Miles Sanders, but you potentially upgraded when you traded for not Devontae Smith. It's crazy with these DeAndre and Devontae names, but DeAndre Swift, who I was really high on. The problem with DeAndre Swift is that he can't really stay healthy, but when he's on the field, I think he's a better back than Miles Sanders. He's really explosive with the ball in his hands. He's also a phenomenal pass catcher. Maybe in certain situations, you can also line him out wide in the slot and he can do some damage at that position for you as well. Then you signed Rashad Penny, who Rashad Penny is pretty solid when he's able to stay healthy, but key word, when he's able to stay healthy, this dude is one of the most fragile running backs in the NFL. You breathe on him and the man gets injured. But if he can stay healthy and Philadelphia is able to find a way to keep him on the field and give him some meaningful snaps, I think that he could be really good in his backfield. Then you return James Bradbury, Darius Slay, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey. There's a lot of vets on this team that's been with Philadelphia for a very long time that are running it back. There's no way Philadelphia should suffer from the Super Bowl hangover. The teams that suffer from the Super Bowl hangover normally aren't that good. They have a lot of their key contributors from their previous year when they made the Super Bowl who end up regressing, i.e. the LA Rams. Jared Goff regressed. Todd Gurley went from being an elite running back to a below average running back in over the span of a year. I don't think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to have that kind of regression to anybody. And plus, they have drafted really well. They're really good at developing the young players that they have on their roster. They did lose 2 of their coordinators, Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen. Both got head coaching jobs, but I trust and Nick Sirianni. I think that he did a pretty good job of replacing the coordinators that he lost to the head coaching gigs that they received. I don't think Philadelphia is going to have a Super Bowl hangover. If Philadelphia ends up having a Super Bowl hangover, they will need a lot to go wrong. And they will also need this division, like the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Giants, to just be absolutely better than them for that to happen. We saw what they did to the New York Giants in the postseason. They blew those boys out of the water. They were making the New York Giants look like they were a JV high school football team. The Dallas Cowboys, you know what the Dallas Cowboys do, man. In big moments, big games, especially in the postseason, they fold every single time. And the Washington Commanders, although I do like them, I don't think they're on the level of the Philadelphia Eagles. For the Philadelphia Eagles to have a Super Bowl hangover, they need a lot to go wrong more than they need a lot to go right. Everything goes right for Philadelphia, they're going to be right back in the Super Bowl picture. I still think that they're going to make it back to the Super Bowl. I don't really think anybody in the NFC is still remotely close to Philadelphia. You can say the 49ers, but they don't have the talent at quarterback that Philadelphia has. And Jalen Hurts, word on the street is that he's getting into a bigger bag. And I'm not talking about him just getting paid with that massive extension that he recently signed. I'm talking about him improving as a passer. And he was already a really good passer. He was one of the most accurate quarterbacks last season and throwing outside the numbers. So for people who are reporting that Jalen Hurts is improving even more as a passer, that's just outright scary. And with Jalen Hurts, as long as he can stay healthy, I think Philadelphia is going to be one of the best teams in the NFC this year. One thing that I loved about Jalen Hurts is his calm demeanor. I remember after he had that turnover and it really kind of swung the momentum of the game. What did he do the following drive? He came right back with a score of his own. That's what you want to see out of your young quarterback. That's what you want to see out of your leader. Resilience, somebody who doesn't get rattled. Philadelphia needs a lot to go wrong more than they need to go right in order for the Super Bowl hangover to affect them. I don't think they're going to suffer from that at all. I expect them to not only win their division again, but to also be a lock for the playoffs. They're probably the safest bet outside of Kansas City to be a true lock for the postseason this year and to have the number 1 overall seed in their conference. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us with a 5-star review. You can find the JT Sports Podcast available on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. You can go down to the description, scroll down, and you will find the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. You can leave us with a 5-star review on those 2 platforms. Share the podcast with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. And I will see you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.